Hello! In today's presentation, we're going to talk about psychoanalysis. And psychoanalysis is such a fun and really important chapter to learn about in pop culture because, opposed to the misconception we have, our psychology has nothing to do with our cultural life, but in fact, it does greatly influence it. So let's start first with a quick presentation content breakdown. We're first going to talk about the Freudian psyche, where he mentioned some really major theories like dream work and Oedipus complex, and also the Freudian theory of text analysis. Then we move on to the Lacanian psychoanalysis, mulvey psychoanalysis, and Slavoj and Lacanian fantasy. Then we wrap up everything with a quick summary. So, first, what is psychoanalysis? Psychoanalysis is a theory and therapy developed by Sigmund Freud. It explores past experiences and unconscious thought that helps us gain personal insight and resolve emotional conflicts. This long-term, intensive approach can lead to drastic improvements in one's emotional well-being and mental health, which can significantly shape a society by contributing in understanding societal issues like social exclusion, mental health, stigma, and the impact of trauma on our daily societal life. So, psychoanalysis, as I said before in this definition, is a theory that is developed first by Sigmund Freud, who is a very important figure of the 20th century. So Sigmund Freud discovered something new that revolutionized the psychology field, which is the human psyche. And he later on developed a lot of theories, and later on some other thinkers and other doctors took on this theory and it developed into new theories that does explain our daily cultural life. So the Freudian psyche. When we talk about the Freudian psyche, we talk about three major components, which are the ID, the ego, and the superego. And in order to understand the human psychology and the human behavior, you need to understand these three components. So let's try to explain them in easy words. The ID, the ego, and the superego are components of Freud's psychoanalytic theory. The ID represents our basic instinct, a desire seeking immediate gratification. The ego, guided by reality, balances the ID impulses with societal norms, and the superego is our moral conscience, pushing us to follow ethical standards together. They shape our behavior and personality. So these three components are present in every human psychology. So everyone has an ID that always is in need of a basic instinct and some almost like animals, because everyone is in need to eat, to breathe, to sleep, to mate, and other things. So this part of our psyche is called the ID. On the other hand, we have the ego, which is the part guided by societal norms, because when we were first born and we first developed language, we were told how to act, how to do things, how to interact with people, things to say, things to avoid, and this part of our psyche is called the ego. On the other hand, the superego is the part that is very moral and is the moral consciousness of our being, because when you try to do something that is a little bit immoral, there's always a part of you that super immoral moral part that tries to talk you out of it in some way. So let's see an illustration that explains these three parts of the human psyche. So here we can see the tip of the iceberg that represents the conscious, the preconscious that is a little bit submerged, and it's a part that is easy to access and easy to recall with a little bit of efforts. So we have the preconscious, where we find the ego, and on the deeper level we have the superego and the ID. Now let's move on to the Oedipus complex. This theory has raised a lot of concern, and a lot of people did not accept it with welcome arms and did not relate to it in some way, and it did revolutionize the psychology world. So let's try to see why was it very controversial. So Freud's Oedipus complex. To the fore between the ages of 3 and 5 years, it involves wish-fulfilling fantasies of the death of the same-sex parent. With the usurpation of their place in the couple, inverse forms are also central. The boy's fear of castration by the vengeful father and the girl's fear of loss of love lead to the abandonment of these wishes and to the installation of the superego. So, the Oedipus complex says that when at a certain age, we were always attracted to the opposite sex parent. But we can notice that he always tries to talk about the boy and his mother. And we don't find a lot of sayings about the opposite relation, which is the girl with her father, because he always thought that women had like the girls, he viewed it on another level, because he said that girls, when they're little, they have the need to give life or something like this. But basically, Oedipus complex is a complex or a theory that does not quite reach everyone, and not everyone agrees with it, and this is what makes it very controversial. So let's move on to the dream work. Sigmund Freud's dream theory outlined the interpretation of dreams, proposes that dreams are disguised fulfillments of some repressed, unconscious wishes, making them the royal road to understand the unconscious mind. He also distinguished between the manifest content, what you remember, and the latent content, the hidden true meaning of your dreams, arguing that the mind uses a process called dream work to censor and symbolize unacceptable desires into distorted narratives. So, for Sigmund Freud, he always have seen dreams as, quote, the royal road to the repressed and to understanding the human psyche, because you can tell that sometimes when you wake up from a very, very strange dream, you try to make sense of it and you try to understand and relate to it, but you cannot, because you need to, in order to do so, you need to understand the dream work, and you need to be able to know that dreams are not always what they seem, but because they have some latent content that you need to know, and it's always a way for our mind, to get rid of some things or process some thoughts or some desires. It tries to let it go and try to let it out, because otherwise you cannot do it, because we have some societal norms, we have the superego that refrain us from doing so. The Freudian theory of text analysis. In this chapter, we explore 3 popular psychoanalytic approaches of interpreting literature, Freudian and Lacanian and Jungian, which is also a very important thinker in the psychology world in general. There are 4 ways to focus on the psychoanalytic interpretation. You can analyze the author's life. You can analyze the thematic context of the work, especially the motivations of characters and the narrator. You can analyze the artistic construction of a text, and you can also analyze yourself or the reader of the literary work using reader-response theory. So the Freudian theory of text analysis states that literature or when an author writes something, it's not always neutral or fictional. When you write something, you kind of put some parts of you on it. It may be intentional, or in some cases it's unintentional. It shows or reflects some deep parts of our personalities, or the repressed parts we can't talk about and we can't show. It's somehow similar to the dream work, but on this time the author tries to get it out through writing or through creating some novels or some things. Let's talk, for example, Frankenstein. So Mary Shelley, you can tell that book was influenced by her daily life, especially after the death of her husband. And we have many examples that we can tackle, but let's not do this, and let's move to the Lacanian psychoanalysis. So, being named after his theorist, Jacques Lacan reinterprets Freud using structuralism shifts psychoanalysis from biology to culture. So for Lacan, he gave us a theory that tries to not mimic but took the Freudian psychoanalysis and gave it a new perspective that is more structured and more cultural than biological. So he explains that this is the lapse of time of a human. Like this is his theory. From 1 to 6 months, we go through a phase which is called the real. Early infancy, when the child feels whole and connected to the world without separation. Then follows the mirror stage, that goes between 6 and 18 months. The child recognizes themselves in a mirror and forms a sense of identity, even though this image is only a partial version of the self. The imaginary, a world of images and emotions, and the first sense of I, based on the mirror stage. And also we have finally the symbolic, when the child enters language, rules, and societal structures. Language shapes how they understand reality. Now let's move on to Mulvey's scene psychoanalysis. So it is known that Mulvey took the Freudian psychoanalysis and tried to apply it to the cinema world. So let's see what she's saying about this. Mulvey uses Freud and Lacan theories to explain how cinema shapes how we look, and Hollywood films position viewers to adopt a male gaze, seeing women as objects of desire, and the camera creates pleasure in looking, which she calls it scopophilia, which basically means watching others without being seen. Women on screen are framed as ornaments or something to be looked at rather than active elements on the storyline, and men on screen drive the action while women freeze the narrative and become visual icons. And she also explains that psychoanalysis helps reveal how these movie techniques work unconsciously on viewers, and she also argues that these patriarchal practices must cease to be presented on modern cinema. Now we have the last thinker, or the last theory, made by Slavoj Zizek. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name right. He talked about the Lacanian fantasy also in some sort of way, but he gave it his special touch. So Slavoj Zizek builds on Lacan's idea of fantasy to explain why we desire things we desire as humans. So he said that fantasy equals the script we use to make sense of life, and fantasy covers the chaos of reality. And we also desire through fantasy, not outside it. Cinema reveals our fantasies, and breaking fantasy exposes the truth. Finally, let's wrap it up with a quick summary. Psychoanalysis tried to explain how our hidden desires and thoughts influence the way we behave and understand the world. Freud says a lot of our actions come from the unconscious, which includes things we repress or don't fully realize. Lacan develops these ideas and links them to language. He explains human growth through the real, the imaginary, and the symbolic, and shows that our desires are shaped by the rule of language and society. And for Zizek, then uses Lacan's idea to look at culture and ideology, arguing that people often follow certain beliefs and systems without noticing it because they are guided by deeper fantasies. Or Mulvey, who believes that psychoanalysis should be more about movies, and she always tries to explain how many movies create a male gaze, where women are shown mainly as objects for visual pleasure. And overall, these thinkers help us see how desire, language, ideology, image affect the way we see ourselves and our culture also. So I hope this presentation was insightful for you, and I hope to receive feedback on it as soon as possible. Thank you so much for watching it.